So, how did I become a coach? What has been my path? Why am I doing this? Many of you watching this may know me well and have been following my journey for decades. But essentially, what kickstarted me into this world of understanding that if I had the right tools, I could be more of a success was going to rehab when I was 20. So, um, when I was 19 years old, I realized that I was using substances, drugs, in a way that was really destructive and that I couldn't really stop without help. And luckily, I was raised in a home where asking for help was really common. And so when I realized that it had gotten out of my control, I immediately went to my university's health center and was like, help. And they helped me drop out of college. I was going to UC Berkeley. And they said, you got to go to a rehab program. So I did a 3-month outpatient rehab program. And this was in 2005. A very kind therapist at that time, really wonderful group therapy sessions and all sorts of great resources. And I remember thinking like, wow, there are so many tools now that I have that I didn't have before. Like if I'm having a bad day or a stressful moment, I could just call a friend or go for a run instead of using substances. And I know that sounds like duh, but at the time when I was like 19, 20, I didn't think about like having tools. And so I think having this experience like so early on for me was really formative. So I started my adult life with this mindset of like, what else don't I know? Like, what else do I need to know? And I also always had this mindset for wanting to grow and challenge any behaviors that I was doing before. I think like when you overcome something as severe as a drug addiction, you kind of feel like, wow, like I could change anything. So in 2012, I wanted to change my words that I was saying. And be kinder, less mean. I realized like I had a habit of like gossiping about people, putting people down just in casual conversation. And so I did this 6-month challenge called the Kindness Challenge. And a lot of people, maybe you, followed along and cheered me on. And I couldn't say anything negative about anyone, including myself, for 6 months. And after I did that, I was like, well, that was amazing. I'm not going to go back to saying mean things. So I kept going, and I even added in other things like, could I stop negative thoughts? And so for a while I was wearing this rubber band around my wrist to start to notice the conditions by which I would have like really judgmental thoughts. At the time I was living in New York City, and I noticed that it came down to 3 conditions. 1, if I was running late; 2, if I was dehydrated; and 3, if I had eaten sugar. And so I started showing up early to things, carrying a water bottle with me everywhere. And then I decided to quit sugar the following year. So there's all these different, experiments that I've tried in my life. Like, could I feel better? Could I be better? And I just have that mindset. And so in 2013, I was living with a bunch of guys in New York City, and one of their girlfriends I was like having dinner with her one night and explaining that I didn't love my job that I had moved to New York City for. And like, what could I do that I would like more? And she was like, well, you're always talking about nutrition and how to be healthy and how to be a better person. Why don't you be a health coach? And I actually didn't know what a health coach was, or like that was even a thing. But I decided to go to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And that's a year-long training program where we learn all about every facet of health, and also how to support people in a really encouraging and positive way, like kind of like drawing out the best parts of what people already know about themselves and helping people take agency in their lives. Really wonderful program. And so I started that in 2013, and I graduated in 2014, which is when I started my own coaching practice. And what's really funny is like in the beginning, I wasn't helping that many people with health goals. I started helping people with dating goals, which at the time, dating apps were still exciting. Of course, now there's such an eye roll, but at the time they were really exciting. And I had realized that I had a problem. I did not know how to flirt, and I found flirting to be really intimidating. And this was actually the exact problem that helped me find my first life coach, Christina Berkeley. I had attended this eye gazing event that she was hosting where you sit across from someone and you make eye contact. And it's a kind of a fun, flirty event. It's maybe not necessarily a dating event, but it's got some flirty energy. And so at the very end of this eye gazing, you switch partners. She gave everyone a packet of sticky notes, and she had lots of fun and flirty prompts where we would write down the answer and give it to someone. And a couple of the guys at this group handed me a sticky note they were very flirty, and I just froze. And so at the end, when Christina said, "By the way, I'm a life coach. Does anyone want to work with me?" I saw during the event that she was just so alive, and the flirty messages didn't make her freeze. And she just loved this energy of engaging with people. And she was not afraid of it. And I just thought, I want that. I don't know what it is, but I want it. And so I started working with her at the beginning of 2014, which was so wonderful, and figuring out, like, why does that make me freeze up? Why does that make me feel so uncomfortable? And so I started reading books on like how to flirt and how to flirt over text and how to be fun and engaging to get dates on text. And then my friends saw that I was like getting great dates, and they were like, "Can you help me?" And so I was like, "Yeah." And then once I helped them, then they would be like, "Can you help this other person?" So my first paying coaching client, worked with me for online dating. It was actually wild. My roommate at the time was like, "Hey, I'm in Chicago. I'm at this bar with a friend of mine. He's having dating problems. Can you talk to him?" So I get on the phone and I talk him through a few of his dating issues. And I was like, "Yeah, you can work with me." And so voila, then I became a coach. So it's kind of funny because the principles that you learn from like health coaching or life coaching can be applied to dating coaching and vice versa. So some of my early coaching clients, actually a lot of my early coaching clients wanted help with the dating stuff. And I would say that's because love is like the thing that most of us all want the most. That's what I have found. Even if someone hired me because they wanted to advance a business goal, we would sit down and I would be like, "Well, what's on your heart this week? Like, what was really hard?" And they'd be like, "Oh, I'm really fighting with my wife, and that's making everything hard." And so, our primary relationships and our romantic relationships are often the foundation for almost everything else that we do in our life. So, I've been really curious and interested to help people with these types of issues over my career. So while living in New York, I worked with a few other coaches. I worked with this amazing coach named Ron, who really looks like Gandalf. He had a big gray beard, but he was wearing a baseball cap instead of a wizard hat. And he would take me on these long walks through New York City. And at the time, I was very dissociated, very much up in my head. And he used to snap in front of my face and say, "Come back, come back." And at the time, I didn't know what he was doing. And of course, it would work, but I just didn't know. Later, and I'll talk about that, I now have an expertise in trauma-informed care and how childhood trauma impacts our present bodily state. And I know that what was happening is that I was dissociating, and he was bringing me back into my body. Really beautiful. I had a really beautiful experience working with him and a lot of big changes. And then I worked with a really great coach named Emmerich Thorpe. And he really helped me heal a lot of my financial shame, helped me examine that and look. I had gotten a lot of credit card debt when I lived in New York because I just wasn't earning enough. I moved there for a nonprofit job. It just didn't pay enough. New York is so expensive, and I was not prepared. And I just felt like such a failure. And with his beautiful, loving support and compassion, I was able to look at where the root of that shame came from and do a lot of healing. I'm just so grateful for all the coaches that I've worked with. And so I did some more experiments. So I quit alcohol for a year from 2015 to 2016. Then I quit sugar. Then I had a freaking meltdown because all of my crutches were gone. So 2016 was this year where I had a giant breakdown and a giant breakthrough. And so that's when I started working with a therapist to just help me like excavate my childhood. And Pat, I'm so grateful for that woman. Wow. And I feel that like the coaches that I had been working with enabled me to get to the point where I could do such deep therapeutic work. And so in 2017, I was listening to On Being, that NPR podcast with Krista Tippett. She has that very particular clipped way of speaking. And she was interviewing Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And that was the first time I'd ever heard about adverse childhood experiences. And once I learned what those were, which are things that happen to you in childhood, and the more that you have, the more they predict outcomes like addiction, which I had suffered, mental health issues, anything, any heart disease, neurodegenerative disorders. The more stress you had in childhood, the more of these adverse experiences, the more likely you were to suffer from these various health ailments in adulthood. That was such a huge light bulb for me and for many others, maybe for you too. I mean, trauma now has become much more, we're talking about it much more, right? We hear it everywhere, which is wonderful. But back in 2017, I didn't actually know that much about it. And so suddenly I was able to unburden a lot of shame that I had been carrying around about, why it was that I struggled with addiction challenges. And I was able to see that, yeah, there were some certain stressful things in my childhood. I didn't need to blame and shame my parents in order to heal. And so I just did so much work there. And at the same time, I had continued my coaching practice and really expanded. And in the meantime was helping people with my original goal, which was to help people with their health goals. And I had launched a program to help people quit sugar. And I realized after many years of coaching that if people came to me and they had some really severe addictions, eating, alcohol, past drug addictions, love addiction, sex addiction, that they ended up having a lot of trauma in childhood. In fact, what I typically found was that these people had experienced sexual abuse in childhood. And so when I learned about the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, what I learned was that that's also what they found out. The original researchers, it was led by Dr. Vincent Felitti in San Diego, were actually helping people with weight loss. And they were helping all these people with weight loss, which is also what I was helping people with. And they found that people would lose some of the weight, but then they would put it back on. And they were like, what is going on here? And that's what helped them start to ask deeper questions about what happened to people in childhood. And they realized people didn't want to keep the weight off because of this sexual abuse they had encountered in childhood. They wanted to keep people really far away because that felt safer. And so that led to the landmark ACEs study. That study was published in 1998 and really changed everything that we know about health. And so it was interesting to have that parallel where I was helping people lose weight or with those goals and noticing the same thing, like, wow, there's a lot of intense trauma here that's preventing people from making progress. And that was also the same thing that inspired that study. So what's interesting is like, if you dig under the behavior that you can see, but if you dig under these limiting habits and beliefs that we have are part of this greater unconscious that was formed in childhood and by the various experiences that we've had. So I went back to school and I got a master's in public health from Boston University and learned even more about how to read a health study and how to conduct a health study and how to promote health in the public. And I thought, gosh, I don't want to just help people one-on-one. Like I want to change systems. And so in 2019, I got my dream job working for an organization called PACES Connection, which stands for Positive and Adverse Childhood Experiences. So I really wanted to work in ACEs Science Communication, and I got my dream job. It was absolutely a dream. I loved working there. And by 2020, I was working with all of my trauma heroes, Bessel van der Kolk, Gabor Mate, and many others. And it was really a dream come true. So I was hosting live events, discussion events, in my role at Paces Connection as a community facilitator, and that's where I got to meet a lot of the experts in the field, and it was really, really, really wonderful, and I'm so grateful for the people that I got to learn from and work with, and to get to promote that. I moved on to work for the state of Massachusetts for their for a center that had opened up, that I'll just keep quiet because this job ended up being really toxic in a really surprising and unexpected way. And that's where I thought, okay, I want to go back to helping individuals. I've tried working on systems, and a lot of the people in these positions working on systems level change are kind of effed up too. So we need everything, and it's all important. And so, I have a consulting company where I work with care-based organizations, so I'm still getting to do the population health. And then it's been really rewarding to also work one-on-one with folks so that people can move past these barriers that keep us stuck. It's all very, very important and interconnected. So the systems change makers need one-on-one coaching, but then sometimes as a coach, it's nice to see that our work is integrated into creating a ripple effect and systems level change. So that's been my path as a coach. I had taken quite a few years off of one-on-one coaching to work in public health. And I also wanted to examine the morality of the coaching field. There were a few years during the pandemic when a lot of coaching adjacent folks were being called out, especially for their views around like being, anti-vaccine. A lot of people who are like in the disinformation dozen, meaning they were spreading a lot of propaganda related to being anti-vax, had like little grifter type coaching businesses. And I had to really examine my own coaching practice and make sure that it was rooted in integrity, and that I didn't find myself grifting. And I had to examine what that was and what an integrous coaching practice looked like for me. So I started coaching again last year in 2024. And I feel so strongly and in my highest integrity that we all need help to reach our goals and to be our best selves and to find inner peace and inner wisdom, that we do need help and support from each other. So I'm very happy to be coaching again. And so, yeah, that's been my journey.